Hey y'all, it's Gina with threadgraffiti. I just thought I'd take a quick second to send a little video here and show y'all how I center quilts. I have a lot of questions about how I center them. Kimberly makes them really easy because hers are always cut very square on all four sides of the backing. And so basically what I do is I press the backing and I lay it over my long arm, and then whatever's in the center that she's trying to center, that would be this block right here. And so on the other side, we're looking at the wrong side of the fabric. So the correct side's on the bottom. And so this has her label with her name on it. And so she wants that in the center. So what I do is I lay that over the poles. And then I put my quilt top over that, and then I figure out where I want it to be. So if I put it in the center of this block, that's the block that's in the center. But if I put the center of this block in the center of that, it runs out of the backing is not long enough to push it all the way. So what I'm gonna do then is I'm gonna center this top block. And so what I do is on the center of the quilt, so that's gonna be the center right there. And so this is the center point all the way down. I haven't pressed the top one yet. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna mark with a friction pen right there in the center so that I know where the center point is. And then I'm gonna mark a point on the right side and on the left side that I want my quilt top to equal, or to line up to rather. And then I'm gonna walk around to the back and show y'all. So this is gonna be the top of the quilt, and I'm gonna load it over here. And so what I do is I take the friction pen and I mark the top part with this pen. I mark the center, and then I mark the other side so that I know where to put it. And so when I'm loading it, this is gonna be the center where I pin it right here. And then the center part of the quilt right here is gonna match up right there. So it's gonna stay centered all the way down like that. So that when I pin it and load it, then I'm gonna put the batting on there. And then I'll just peek behind the batting to see where my lines are to make sure that I'm lined up on either side, and then to make sure that my points match up right there. Since I'm holding the phone, I haven't put one, but I'll put a mark right here, and then I'll remember to make sure to line it up with this mark right here. And then my two corner marks, when I have the batting there, I'll just pull the batting back and make sure that I line those up right there. So that is kind of how I load a quilt top and try to match up and make sure that the backing is centered the way that I want it to. And so then I make sure that I have enough left over on the bottom to load it to the pole so that my machine can go an inch or so beyond and I won't run into my machine. So that's kind of how I do it. Hope that helps. Okay, so I have the quilt all backing, all loaded. And so just like we talked about, the center of my leader is here. The center of my quilt backing is here. I just fold it in half and mark the mark with a friction pen. And then the marks that we just made a little while ago to mark the top and on the right and the left side. And so that makes it centered. So what we're gonna do now is we are gonna put our batting down. And I usually just leave my batting up an inch or two above where I want to start my quilt. And then on the quilt, same thing, I take the quilt and fold it in half and mark the center point with a friction pen, and that'll go away with the iron. And so that little mark, I'm gonna line up with this mark right here. And so that'll be the center. And then once I do that, what I normally do is just I'm using one hand so I can kind of show you up close what I'm doing here. And so now there's our mark, and we're just gonna put the quilt top right there so it lines up. Now we know where we need to be. Same thing with this corner. There's that corner right there. And then we know that the side mark is right there. And the other side mark is over here. And there's that right there. So I just float my quilt tops. That's just the way that I have always done it. What I do sometimes is put a pin right here at the edge so that when I roll it, it doesn't get distorted at all. So sometimes I do that, but I don't ever load them on the pole. You can if you want to. So that's basically what it is. And then I'm just going to now go through and baste my sides and clamp my edges, and then I'm going to program it. So I'll see you in just a second. Okay, I'm back and I have my quilt top basted. So I've basted the side, the top, and the other side. And what we are going to do is I'm going to show you how I program the size and all of that, because Kimberly likes hers to be pretty small, so I usually size them down, and I have a lot of questions about that sometimes. So here's what we're going to do. First thing that I do is I set up the area, and I am working on a Handy Quilter Forte. I just got it not too terribly long ago. I just set up my new area in my room. And so what we're going to do is I'm going to move you over here for just a second, and I'm going to touch the area button, and I'm going to touch the 2 corner button. It says 2 corners. And what I do is I go from right here, and then I move over to the other side of the quilt. And when I get to the other side, I'm usually about an inch or so beyond where the quilt stops. So I usually go over just a little bit, and then I hit 2 corner again, and you'll hear it ding. And so that tells me it's 45.25. And when I measure it with a tape measure, it is 45.25 if I have just a little bit of overhang, so that's perfect. And then I already measured this one before, but what I do is I usually measure them before I load them, the top, from the top to the bottom, because once I get it on there, if it's a big one and you forget, it's kind of a pain. So I usually measure it before I load it. And this one is it's 45 inches as well, so I want it to be just a little bit more and hang over just like we just did on the sides. So I'm going to make it 45.5, let's say. And once I get to the bottom, I can chop it off if I want to. All right, so I'm going to move it back over. And so once you hit the 2 point and you set in your width, then you just type in your height, and then it sets your box for you. And you can see that box. And so this is the pantograph that we are going to use. It is called Stacked Snails. It's right here. And the design is set up from the designer at 14.9 inches. That's 15 inches. And it's 18 inches wide, so that is way too big for anything that Kimberly would want. So what we're gonna do is, a good rule of thumb for me and some of the ones that Kimberly likes is I usually try to do them around 3 or 4 inches as kind of a starting point, and then I'll either tweak it up or tweak it down a little bit, just depending on how it looks. And so what's important when you're doing this is to make sure that it's not squished. It doesn't look like something sat on it, have it be too wide or too tall. So it's kind of good to make sure that you count and make sure that it's kind of just spaced out right. So we are going to start and put in 4 inches. Oh wait, you know what I want to do is I want to show you. So this one's 15 by 18, so it's about 3 inches bigger width-wise as it is height. So I usually kind of take that into consideration. So again, I'm going to change the height to 4 inches. And then I'm going to change the width to, let's say, 6. And then let's just see what it looks like. And if we zoom in, which, what I normally do is I usually pull it over here into the design so I can kind of see. Oops, I hit your camera there. So I can kind of see what it looks like up close. And it definitely looks a little bit too wide. So we're going to make it 5 inches. And then we're going to zoom in just a little bit more. Actually, a lot more. And then we're going to see, so each box represents an inch. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And so we know that already because of this, but I like to kind of look at it on the graph just to kind of get an idea of how big it is and how, if I like the way that it's kind of scaled. And then what I usually do is stick it all the way in the corner, and then I bring my machine up. So that's the crosshairs, that represents where I'm at. So the center of where those two lines connect, that's where my needle is going to be. And so I'm not going to leave this, I'm not going to go to that point, I'm just going to go right here. So, and then I'm going to look at it, and that's going to be how big the area that's going to take up, that is going to take up this area. And so then I'm like, well, is that big enough for Kimberly, or small enough rather, or is it going to be too big? And I think that it will be okay. So I'm going to leave it 4 by 5. I'm going to go hit the house button, and it's going to zoom me back out. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to repeat, and I'm going to fill it in. Oh wait, you know what I do is, so also I write down 4 by 5 in case I need it later. So don't forget to write it down. I always write it down just so that I can look back and tell how big I made something on my notes, so I don't have to open up a file and go in and look at it. Okay, so again, we're gonna go back to repeat, and we're gonna hit fill. We're gonna fill it in, and what we're gonna do is we're gonna close the gap where the red and the green buttons are. We're gonna close it until it turns black. And that means that there's not gonna be any starts and stops. And since it didn't go all the way to either edge, we're gonna make another design, and then that makes it go over the edges on both sides. Now we need to work on the vertical. I know it's gonna need at least probably 2 more. We're gonna close the gap until it looks like the rest of it from kind of a far away. You don't really see a lot of like open in between them. And then I zoom way in, and I usually try to make it so the space in between that first curve, I usually try to make the space up above it the same, so that when you look at it, it looks consistent and it doesn't look like you've done one row and then another row. And so that looks pretty good. And then what I also do is I look and see that space that's up there in between them. Is that going to be a lot of space, or do I need to make it one, like, do I need to add another row? And I think because I made the quilt a little bit longer and a little bit wider on my dimensions for this box, I think it will be okay to not add another row. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna baseline, that's gonna make those little black dots go away. And then we are gonna go to modify. We're gonna crop it. We're gonna hit crop the outside. So that crops everything that's on the outside of that pink line. And then we're gonna close the edges. And so now that gives us all of our start points and all of our end points. So I go to, now I hit baseline. And now I go to the Pro Stitcher tab and the new start and end, and I do some jumps just to make sure that I know what it's gonna do. If you forget to hit baseline, which I have done, it could sometimes just jump here and jump there and jump here, and it's all weird. And I don't really know exactly how to explain baseline to you, just make sure you hit it. And then we're gonna go back up to the start point and everything looks fine. And so now I'm gonna go to File, and I'm gonna hit Save, and I'm gonna go to Workspace, and I'm going to hit Clear and Caps, and I'm gonna do FQS, and this is the quilt that is for the Stronger Together. And so I am going to do Stronger to G. I forgot I spelled together there for a second. Okay, Stronger Together. So now it is saved, and we know it's saved, and we're basically ready to go. So now I kind of just go back and look and see how big it's going to be and make sure that I like it the way I've programmed it. And I think it's going to be good. Okay, so now we are ready to start. And so I've already made sure that the needle is fresh. I put a fresh needle in for every project. Make sure I have the right thread color in, that the bobbin is clean, the bobbin is full, all that prep work to make sure that you're ready to go. So I've already done all that stuff. And now we are ready to hit go and see what happens. Always make sure that your needle is up. Very, very, very important. Make sure your needle is up. every single time I do a start and stop, I look down, make sure the needle is up, and then I hit resume. So I think it's going to be pretty good. I will take the camera off of the tripod here and I will show you. So I think that scale is going to be perfect for what Kimberly likes. It's going to be like less than my first finger, the distance between like the density, and I think that will be perfect for what she likes. I'll also keep track of what time I start and what time I stop. And so we're going to let this stitch out, and I'll come back and check in with you in a little while once it has stitched a little while. So we're starting row 1 here. Okay, so I deliberately left a slightly used bobbin in the bottom so I could show you what happens if you have, or not if, but when you have a thread break, or not a thread break. Basically the same concept. If your thread breaks, you do the same thing as when your bobbin runs out. So this is the Prewound bobbin that I use. I buy them from Hab+Dash, and this is their Prewound, and I love them. So that's what I use all the time. And so I am going to, I'm also going to mention that I always keep a flashlight here at my area so that I can look underneath and see my stitches and make sure that my tension looks good. Whatever process works best for you. I've heard of people that have mirrors and all kinds of stuff. This is what I like best. So I just like peek my head under there, use the flashlight, and check it out and make sure periodically. So those are my tools that I always keep right here. So what I'm going to do right now is I am going to, I usually pull the machine over to the side when I have a thread break, but it will probably be easier if I just hang out right here in this area. So what I've done is I've turned my motor off. I've hit the button to stop the motor. And I am now going to bend down here and dust it off. I am not gonna go crazy dusting right this minute, but I always do dust the area each time I change my bobbin. I give it a little squirt of oil, and then I get my new bobbin back in there. Since we're on the video, I'm not gonna take a lot of time to oil and do that. It doesn't have to be done every single time. All right, so I have my new bobbin in there, and when I change my bobbin, I always pull over to the side and make sure that my tension is okay before I start back up. So I pull my bobbin thread up, and over here on the side, I kind of just do some little wigglies. Make sure that nothing weird happens. Sometimes when I put a new bobbin in, I'll get like a weird snag, or, you know, things have happened in the beginning. So I always pull it over there just to check. So if you're one of those people that asks not to have your quilt trimmed afterwards, you might see some weird little squigglies on the side, and that's why. Okay, so what we're gonna do now is we are gonna come over here, and I'm gonna try to show you as closely as I can what we're gonna do here. Okay, so right here in the dark area, right here is where the thread broke, or the thread ran out of bobbin. And so what I am going to do is I usually, so since it actually technically broke right here, it ends right here, What I normally try to do is start and stop in a seam area. So where the seam is right here, where the thread broke, I would probably try to start right there. But I usually like to give myself a little bit more extra where it overlaps. So I'm going to start right here where this white and the blue connect right here where that thread is. So this is what I do. I don't know if you're supposed to do it this way. This is what I do. So I go over there and I pull the bobbin in or up right where I want it. And then I go back over there and I needle down. And I can see exactly where I'm at. And I know that it is right where I want my thread to be. And then what I do is I come up here to the screen and I'm going to go to Pro Stitcher. And then I'm going to go to New Start and Stop. And I'm going to go over here to Auto. It's going to turn green. And then I'm going to hit it again. And that's going to change my green start and stop to right there where my crosshairs are, right where I want to start. Okay, so I'm going to put the camera back. And now it is set up to start right there. So now I want to make sure to pull up my needle, just like we've talked about. Every single time you hit resume, make sure your needle is up. And then there's a tie off on resume option. I usually tap that and let it tie it off. And so I'm going to click resume. And it's doing its tie off. And now it's continuing. I usually leave my tail there for a minute until the machine moves out of the way. And then you don't have to do this since it's already tied off, but I usually tie it into a knot and then into another little knot, or you can bury it, but I'm not going to do that. And then I trim it down and then you can't even see it. A loose thread. I will trim that one in a second. And so it's a good time right now, since we changed the bobbin, to look underneath there with your flashlight and make sure nothing looks funny with your tension. Mine looks fine. Yay. Okay, we are almost ready to advance. All right, we're gonna trim the threads. And then what I do is I look up at the screen and I make sure that I'm going to put my crosshairs right where the new line, the new row starts, so that all of the dark is where we haven't stitched yet. So we want to make sure that all of that is within our area. So we're gonna put our needle down and I'm gonna do it right about there. So I have a needle down, all my black that I haven't stitched yet is down below the crosshairs, and then we're gonna hit drag. And as soon as we hit drag, it turns into drop. All right, and so now what that means is we're going to loosen our clamps. I'm gonna put you right here. So you can see, I'm just gonna loosen my clamps on either side. And so the needle is down right there. And now we're going to unlatch our little latches on the side, and we're gonna roll it so that this quilt ends up on this back pole. All right. Oh, I think my camera's hitting the pole. Sorry for the wiggles. All right, and we're gonna want the machine to go back as far as we can without it making the quilt wrinkle up. And right now it's wrinkled because we haven't fixed it yet. So we're gonna put our 2 clamps. And the Forte has 3 clamps, but I'm only using 2 right now. And so I usually take the bottom of my hand and push it down underneath the pole. I try not to pull any of the quilting because Kimberly is an excellent quilter and almost always hers are going to be very square. So I don't want to try to pull on this and distort her quilt. And now we're going to pull that front bar. Oops, and I didn't do the latch back here. So we have got it pulled, and so we want to pull it. It's in the beginning, it took me kind of a long time to figure out. You want to pull it tight, but not too tight. Because if you pull it too tight, it gets this pulled too tight, and if you don't pull it enough, you've got a lot of wiggles and waves, and it's not taut enough. So, all right. So this is how I want it. I'm going to hit the drop button. So just like we hit it a second ago, it turned to drop. Now we're going to hit that button. And now we are free to pull up the needle. And when you know that your quilt didn't move when you pulled up the needle, everything should be lined up. And so that's what I do every time that I advance it. This machine is a lot bigger, so I have to get kind of on my tippy toes. And then, so what I do is I'm going to bring you back over here. And what I do is I take, this new machine also has a little red laser, and so I line up the little red laser on that stitch line, and I make sure that it's in the same place up on the screen. So I want my line to be in the same place as it is here. So the machine says that it's going to stitch there, and so does the screen. It both says that they're in the same place. And I'll go sometimes to the side and make sure that my lines line up this way as well as this way. So you want everything to line up so that it makes a seamless advance. So as you advance, there's not too much room or not enough room, and that just kind of comes with experience, I think. Okay. Sorry about the camera wiggles. All right, so that side, and sometimes one side will be a little bit farther down than the other, and it's just from the way that you're pulling it down. And I just go through each side and I look up at the top, and then I check it and make sure that it is in the same place. And sometimes you can just take it, because we're talking about just centimeters, not very much. So you can just take it, and I usually just kind of push the pole or pull it just like a little tiny bit just to line it all up. I think I need to oil my machine. I hear a little bit of noisies in the back there. Okay, so we're going to baste the sides. And sometimes I use the basting stitch, and sometimes I don't. Most of the time I don't. I usually just use the regular stitch. I stay on the very, 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 very edge of the quilt, and then it's covered up in the binding. I feel like it's a little bit more secure with a regular stitch than a basting stitch, but that's, again, personal preference and what your customers want. All right, I'm going to do this side now. Trim it. And sometimes I start on the bottom and I go up to where I want to be if I've already checked to make sure that I'm lined up. And I am just checking again. And now I'm going to go over here to where my next little green dot is, telling me where I need to go. And then I'm going to go to Pro Stitcher, New, Start, and End. I'm going to hit the arrow down to put myself where I want to be on the next green little dot. I'm going to make sure my needle is up. I hold my thread. I don't know why I do it, but I do. And then I hit resume. And on the first row, after you've advanced, I'm going to take the camera off of the tripod again. And I always like to make sure that the distance here is what it was up above. And so this one's turning out just fine. And so usually on the first row, I do kind of stick around and make sure that it's stitching the way that I want it to and in the place that I want it to. Because with some designs like the chicken wire and some of those orange peel, you really have to babysit it when you advance to make sure that it kind of stays at where you want it to be. So I'm gonna let it stitch out this whole area and then I'll meet you at the end. Okay, we have stitched out the entire quilt except for the very last row. And so what we're going to talk about here is I made my design come all the way down to here. So that means this space is going to quilt and it doesn't need to quilt. And so I am embarrassed to say that I didn't know how to do this for a really long time, and it's really very simple. So when I do the design, when I set it up in the beginning, I always make the bottom longer and then I can just trim it down. And so I used to really stress about it, but here's what you do. So what we are going to do is we're first going to go and tell it, so we're on the last dot. Okay, so that we're just going to keep that in the back of our mind and we're going to hit cancel. Oh my gosh, it feels wrong, but it's not. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to go over here and we're going to turn off this tripod light because it's messing with my eyeballs. Okay, so we're going to make sure that our crosshairs are beyond where the design that we set up are. And we're going to go up here and we're going to go to area. Okay, and we're going to set up, same thing as we did in the beginning when we set up the whole area. We're going to set up an area. We're going to go to corner. Oh, except that's not what we want. Hit undo. We're going to come down a little bit because we don't want to go way up here and do it. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to come down here so that we're just beyond where our quilt top is, and we're going to hit to the to corner. Okay, and then we are going to go across. Ignore my squeaking. I will grease it when we get done. And then I'm going to bring you over here. Hang on. I'm coming. All right. So we're going to bring you over here so that you can see what I am doing. So now on this side, we want to make sure that we've come beyond the design, and then we're going to hit the to corner again. Okay, so now it's gone the whole width of the quilt, and now we're going to tell it the height. I usually just use 5 every time. Even though I know it's not 5 inches, I just use 5. Now, that whole area right there that it has made that new area, we're going to get rid of it. And so we're going to go up to modify. And then so when we first set it up, we cropped the outside. We cropped all of the design that was on the outside of the quilt that we didn't want. Now we're going to crop the inside. When you see all those green and red dots, we're going to hit close the edges. And now our design is now even with the bottom of our quilt. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go back over, squeaky, squeaky, to the other side. And now we are gonna Oh, look, I lost you. I paid no attention to where you were. Okay. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna go to the Pro Stitcher. We're gonna go to New Start and End. And we're gonna go all the way down to our New Start. And so now what it's gonna do is just gonna cut off all of those pointies that we didn't need before. All right, and so we're gonna go here. We're gonna pull up our bobbin thread and we're gonna make sure our needle is knocked down into the quilt, and we're gonna hit run. And we're gonna hit proceed. Look at that, we did it. So now we're not gonna waste thread, we're not gonna waste our customer's fabric down there, we're not gonna waste our time, and we're just gonna go just beyond where the quilt top is. All right, we're gonna let this finish stitching out. And then I'm gonna show you one more thing. Okay, so we're all finished. However, we're gonna pretend. All right, let's pretend we got all of this done except like the last couple of inches on the end, which actually just happened to me yesterday. I got the whole thing finished, and for some reason, sometimes these are computers and computers do weird things sometimes. And so it just stopped and I had to turn it off. And so a couple of years ago, I probably would have cried real tears. But now I'm gonna show you what to do. So let's just say this is frozen and we have it won't click. Sometimes that happens. It doesn't happen very often, but sometimes it does. All right, so what we want to do first off is we're going to make sure that we already saved it. And so we talked about that earlier. Make sure you save it, make sure you write it down, make sure you write down how big you made your design, all of that stuff. Okay, so we're going to go back down to this bottom row. That's what we're gonna do. So we're gonna turn the whole thing off and we're gonna pretend like this just messed up, okay? And so it messed up. Oh no. We're gonna just shut it down. And so right now we're gonna just hit shut down. But if it was, just not responding, you'd probably just push the button, turn it all off. But what we wanna do before that is we're gonna go over here. I'm gonna turn you around. We're gonna go over here and we're going to go to this start point on our quilt, okay? And that means we're just gonna go right there. You can put your needle down if you want to. I don't. What I usually do is I take a friction pen and I put it right through the hole. And let me show you. I take my friction pen, it goes away with heat, and I put it right through the little hole, right where the little laser light is, and then I move it out of the way, and then I make a nice big dot so I remember where I want to be, in case I want to leave and I'm not going to do it till tomorrow or whatever. Okay, so that's what we're going to do first. And now we are going to tell the machine to shut off. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to hit reboot so it doesn't take quite as long right now. Oh, do you want to save your workspace before rebooting? Yes. Even though we did it, we'll just say yes. We already made it stronger together. Do I want to override it? Sure. So as long as you saved it in the beginning, you're fine. So we're going to restart it. And so since the motors aren't engaged anymore, it did move. And that's okay, because we now know where we want to be because we put the little blue dot there. I'm going to move you down just a little. Okay, and so now when this turns back on, I'm going to show you what to do. Okay, so in our make-believe world, this part over here didn't finish. We had to restart the computer. We're going to tap on this and we're going to make it bigger. And then the first thing that we're going to do We're gonna go to our workspace, and the last thing that we did should be the very first one there, and it is Fat Quarter Shop Stronger Together. We're gonna click it, and then the very first thing is we're gonna hit baseline. Again, I told you I'm not exactly sure what the baseline does, but it's a magical button. I love it. Okay, so we're gonna hit baseline. And now what we're gonna do is we're gonna go over here to where our little blue dot that we made is. Okay, so right there is actually where our quilt, oh, you're getting out of the picture again. So right there is actually where we want to be. And the start point is way over there. So we've gone back to the spot that we want to be, and we're going to go to Pro Stitcher, and we're going to go to new start point, and we're going to jump down to where we want to be. And that was that very last green dot, which is right there. Okay, now we're going to go to modify, and we're going to go to reposition, and then we're going to hit start point. And look, it went all the way over here now. And we can make it a little bigger so you can see. We'll make it go down a little bit. So now where our crosshairs are, where our actual needle is the same place as it is on that. So now we can move about freely. So now the machine knows where we are. And sometimes when you do this, it won't be exactly in the same place that it was before. And so it gives you these little nudge buttons, and you can nudge it up or down. And so what I just do is I go to the top of one of them, and I make sure that that's that. And sometimes it helps to really, really zoom in, and you'll see that my design is actually a little bit lower. So I would nudge it up just an ooch. But so what we didn't finish in our imaginary world is over here. And so let's say that our quilt, oh my goodness, I'm going crazy here. All right, so let's say that our quilt thread broke right there, or the machine just stopped, like I said. So what we're gonna do is we're going to put our needle down. We're gonna go to Pro Stitcher. We're already on new start and end. We're gonna hit the auto button, and then the auto button again. And then we're gonna lift up the needle. And now the needle knows that that's where you are, and this is where your thread will get to finish. And so then you will just make sure your needle is up, you'll hit run, and then it'll finish those last little pieces that you didn't finish before you had a computer meltdown. So that in a nutshell is kind of the main things that I ran into as a new quilter. And I hope that this helped. This quilt is part of the Stronger Together, and I'll link it down on the bottom. Everything that I used, I will link down on the bottom. And so my YouTube channel is very new. I don't have very many subscribers because I just started. So I would love for you to subscribe. I'm hoping to do at least one video a month going forward. I'm going to do some free motion going forward, and I'm going to do a lot of other things. So I'm hopeful. I'm not very good at editing and that kind of thing, so I'm hopeful that I can figure it out. But again, my name is Gina, and I'm with Threadgraffiti, and I'm one of the long arm quilters for the Fat Quarter Shop. And I would love for you to follow along and let me know what you thought about today's video. Thanks a bunch, and have a wonderful day.